Alright, hi, I am Gloria Vana, and I am currently trying to get filthy freaking rich. And that has resulted in me working to the point that I have gotten sick and I've had to take a few days off of work entirely for recovery. And I am the kind of guy who generally overworks. However, an experience happened yesterday which left me really reeling and considering how much effort and how much time should I dedicate to recovery. So I don't often get sick, and my pain tolerance, or more specifically, my perception of pain, is that it is simply bodily or sensory information which I needn't care too much about beyond heeding it as a signal and choosing whether I listen to it actively, or I choose to delay it, or I choose to do anything else, or I choose to see it as eustress or distress, and yada yada yada. And I have been following the work of Charlie Morgan, who basically said that discipline is very important, yes, and you need to be in it 80% of the time if you want to get any good work done. However, then that 20% of the time, you also need to focus on rest, the best, possibly highest quality kind of rest you can get, otherwise, you risk burnout. And then there's stages of burnout, which I will show on the screen right now, and I got to, I believe, stage 4. The experience that happened with me yesterday was that I was working normally. I have an internship right now in which I'm learning, and I was working in that. And I already had a headache and a little bit of a cough and whatnot for the morning and whatnot. And at around 2 p.m., I just started to feel my body get increasingly cold, like more, more than normal, more than the AC was actually outputting, right? So it was clearly something happening with my body. So I thought, okay, I'll take a 5 minute break. I'll just lie down on the seat and I will deal with it, right? I'll do some breath work, it generally works, some Wim Hof generally works, right? However, that did not work because after like 5 7 minutes, honestly, time was a blur back then. I wasn't really focusing on it. Um, I felt like I would cry. And so, what I generally do when I would cry, especially in circumstances where I do not want to be seen as weak, is that I just repeat in my mind, bracket, because I literally just want to close off that part and I make a notification with my brain that hey, I'm going to follow this, I'm going to look into this, and I'm going to think about it and give time to it, but not right now. We will find it unwise to focus on it or take care of it right now, right? And so that happened. I bracketed it for that time, and then all of a sudden my body started to get really warm, and I was very confused by it. So what I did is that it just continued getting warm, and I was just still laying down. And by that point, it had been like 10 15 minutes. People came to check upon me, and they were like, "Bro, you fine?" And I said, "Yeah." Give me 5 10 minutes. I'll get back to work, right? And after that, I'm not sure what happened. Maybe it was because I said something along the lines to someone else, like, "You, this is the age to suffer a little. I'm fine right now. I'll handle this. I'll get back up in like 5 minutes or whatnot." Or maybe it was the sheer physical pain or the probably months of burnout catching up to me. And what ended up happening is that I just cried. My face, mind you, was like absolutely stone cold. It was literally like this. If you can see it, like I'm sure you can see my lips and that they have no measure of emotion. My eyes were quite literally just normal. They were not emoting in any particular fashion as far as I could perceive, but all I was feeling at that moment was a sense of weakness. And it wasn't a level of physical weakness, but I'll get to that later. But basically, yeah, I was crying. Tears were coming out of my eyes, but I didn't really feel sad in any way. I felt helpless, right? And that just continued to build up and build up, and it continued coming out I continued screaming inside of my brain to bracket and bracket, but of course, it did not work. Eventually, I remembered that your mind can only hold one thought inside of it at one time, right? And so, what I did is, after the tears slowly started to reduce, I picked up my e reader, my Kindle, and whatnot, and I started reading some light novel on it. And then I read that for a little while. I read some pages, made some conversation with the guys, and after that, ate a little bit of fruit and whatnot. Went to the bathroom like 5 minutes after that, vomited, and then I thought, yeah, bro, fuck this. Body's at bad state. I'm getting a headache. I'm getting a little bit of sick. I'm getting some cough. I already had my cough, and that is starting to worsen. And so, what I chose to do is that, yeah, I'll take a early leave. I have done like most of my tasks, and I will deal with the rest of it later. And it worked. I just took all of Charlie Morgan's advice and it practically went most of the way as he predicted, wherein severe depression pangs were coming in, and my body, it felt like in zone 4 burnout, my body felt like it wasn't in my control. But in reality, I had burned myself out. I'm not even sure how, to the point that I couldn't handle work, anything beyond what I had to do, right? And I have realized from this three things. The first is that my ability to take pain has most certainly gone up from this. I will need to rest to be able to maximize that usage. However, I will absolutely come to see that my ability to take stress and have use stress in my life has gone up, to put in the effort has gone up. However, I have also found myself in a crossroads. I feel like I have seen a canyon, and rather than taking some shortcut, like, quite literally just crossing a bridge and whatnot, what I have done is taken the far more stupider path and far more strenuous path of, like, quite literally climbing down the canyon, and then I have finally climbed down. I have gotten rid of mentally of all of the things that were on the previous side of the canyon that were associated with the previous version of myself, and now I'm just staring up at the future version of myself at this practical crossroads where I do not know whether I should turn back and climb all the way back up, which will require as much of work, or I should continue forward with this path. And I have, of course, chosen to continue with this path. For context, this is something like, do I actually go to college now? Do I actually work on my grades? Do I maybe take a SAT exam? Do I do something like this? Or do I continue with entrepreneurship, with content creation, with things like this? This is not the main channel, by the way, it's just more of a diary in some ways. And do I continue with all of the things that I've been doing and frankly failing at for the past 2.5 years? Or do I go back to the normal path, so to speak? And people will give me advice which they feel is to some degree compassionate, in that you don't need to take that much stress upon yourself. What you're doing is frankly a little bad for you in terms of your health, in terms of your mental health too. What you are doing is not really required, as from what I can tell, you have a pretty good economic background. However, whilst that advice is compassionate, whilst that advice makes logical sense, it does not make sense to me emotionally. The reason I started all of this is because I hated that very level of mediocrity, of the powerlessness of the current self, which I know I would be subjected to even if I chose that path, and hence why I have chosen to go through all of this, to go through this process of destruction, where by climbing down into the canyon, I have gotten rid of all of the things that associated me with the previous side of the canyon, and instead now I have the choice of going to the other side. I feel empty. I feel like all of the clumps of sand which were limiting me down, which were in my hand, I've let go, and now I can pick up clumps of gold nuggets or whatever else instead, which I choose to pursue. And I will still continue with this path. However, it did make me feel a little melancholic in that there is this food. I'm not gonna say the name, but let's say it's pasta, right? And this specific pasta dish has been really beneficial, has been really tasty to me for practically 55, maybe even 70% of my life. I'm 19, so that's pretty low, but it is still relevant to me, right? And now I have come to see, after like tasting it a few times, like the past 3, 4 times, it has not been as tasty as I perceived it in the past. And the restaurant hasn't changed. Maybe the chefs and whatnot have. Maybe the recipe and whatnot has changed for them. But like this was a recipe that I could go to consistently and I would not be disappointed. However, for the past few experiences, all I've been getting is said disappointment. It hasn't been living up to that previous experience. So, what I've seen is that either in some ways my paradigm has changed in that it has expanded, or specifically, and this is basically like a grander point of the first. I am not the person I was before, and I don't value the things I previously did, whether it be in terms of food, in terms of my goals, in terms of my actions, in terms of everything else. So, if I see myself currently as I am, as a deconstruction of what I was before, which is to some degree weakness, and mind you, I'm still weak or powerless as I consider. However, it's not really manifested that much behaviorally. Then I have no, no damn reason not to go towards this path wherein I may have a bunch more burnout, maybe even worse burnout than this. I hope not. I'll try to reduce it with good rest and whatnot, where I may and likely will have this level of burnout at least a few times and make progress, get the things I want, which is buying things like miniature wargaming models, buying good gifts for my friends, buying good things for myself, supporting artists, commissioning art, things like that, rather than not going and traveling towards this path at all and taking back the U turn. I do not want to do that. This has been helpful for me, and I hope it will be helpful for you. Cheers.